that do not have enough water or resources to grow their food.
So interesting. Thank you, Monzi. Next up, I have a question for Vicki Clarice. Vicki, from your more than 3 decades as a food scientist and manager of the ISS food system at NASA, how have you observed food impact astronaut morale and psychology?
I'm a big scientist, and I've worked for more than 3 decades with NASA food systems at the Johnson Space Center. When I first came to work at NASA, it was very early in the shuttle program. The missions were short, and so very few of the crew members were really super serious about what food they took with them. We had a list of items, and they would come in and choose from our menu what they wanted for each meal. But as we transitioned into long duration spaceflight, first with our crew members going to stay on Mir, and then with the International Space Station, it quickly became obvious that the psychological importance of food had increased a great deal. As NASA goes forward to a mission to Mars, it's going to be even more important because that mission is likely going to be close to a 3-year mission from beginning to end. And so the Deep Space Food Challenge puts a focus on the fact that food is going to be significantly important on that first mission to Mars.
Right. I mean, if any of you are like me who remembers very clearly eating astronaut ice cream, so it's a really special treat, but I'm sure for our astronauts who are up in space for 3 years, it gets a little bit old. So really interesting to think about, astronaut nutrition and how food impacts their missions. So next up, we're going to hear from Chris Hadfield. Chris, how do you think efficient food systems that produce nutritious and delicious food will change the game for these long-term duration missions?
Hi, I'm Commander Chris Hadfield, astronaut, 3-time space flyer. And it was Frederick the Great and Ernest Hemingway who said, an army marches on its stomach, but astronauts boldly go also on their stomachs. And you don't want to be exploring the universe eating, reconstituted food and peanut butter. And on board the spaceship, I sure wasn't going to boldly go on the reconstituted mashed potatoes that we had, but there was some excellent food, the thermostabilized Hawaiian chicken, and for me, a favorite, the dehydrated shrimp cocktail. But when we go into deep space, it's going to be even more important. It's not just the nutritional value and what's necessary for your body, but it's the psychological value as well. Food is a big, important part of being a human being. And the further you get from home, the more important it is. So I'm really pleased to be part of the Deep Space Food Challenge, both from what I can contribute for some of my ideas, but also for my fellow explorers who are going to be out there eating that food in the near future.
Thanks, Chris. And last but not least, we will hear from Simon Fleming. Simon, what role does nutrition play in overall astronaut health and performance? Of course, as well as all of us Earthlings down here.
Hi, my name's Simon Fleming. I'm a UK-based doctor and the clinical advisor for the Deep Space Food Challenge. Look, human beings have been involved in manned spaceflight for the past 5 decades. Diverse nutrients are necessary to help astronauts and those in that extreme environment combat bone loss, muscle atrophy, cardiovascular dysfunction, upright intolerance, and all those other physiological changes we see in space. We also know that there's a variety of digestive illnesses and problems that we see because of a lack of fruit and vegetables from a fresh source. Nutrition plays a key role in combating the negative effects of space travel, like radiation exposure, immune deficiency, and those bone and muscle issues. So space nutrition must contain 16 essential nutrients, with about 15% protein, 30% lipids, and 55% carbohydrates. We know that people in space lose weight at a terrifying rate, most of the astronauts that have been studied lost between 2 to 5% of their pre-space weight, some up to 10%. Microgravity means that you lose bone mass, you get immune problems. So nutrition plays a huge role in maintaining astronaut health and performance. Also, it maintains your psychological well-being, which is key for prolonged spaceflight.
Thank you so much to all of you who joined in virtually. Really interesting to be thinking about these issues with astronauts and their nutrition. Now we're going to move down to Earth, and I'm going to ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves, and then we'll kind of dig into our conversation. We'll start with you, Mackenzie.
Hello, my name is Mackenzie McAleer. I'm with Fresh Produce Supply. We fulfill harvest demand from fresh produce buyers anywhere. We provision agricultural systems and beneficial biological production, and are focused next year on the International Space Station, but in the next few years on spacecraft, space platforms, the Moon and Mars.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chef Joseph Yoon, Edible Insect Ambassador at Brooklyn Bugs. And also, I have the great privilege to be the Culinary Director for the Future of Food at South by Southwest. Hope you guys have been having a wonderful time. And also now, I just feel really humbled to join the Methuselah Foundation as their culinary advisor for the Deep Space Food Challenge. Thank you, guys.
I'm Dane Goebel. I'm the co-founder of Methuselah, and I'm just very happy that NASA reached out to us and asked for a little bit of help in running their amazing challenge. So we did phase 1 last year, and we're into phase 2 now. And I'm very happy to say that virtually all the winning teams from phase 1 are now coming into phase 2 and are going to build some amazing prototypes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Florina Goebel. I'm the communications director for the Methuselah Foundation supporting the Deep Space Food Challenge. And Dane and I have the same last name because we are married, just full disclosure. And so we also work together and are strong partners in this, and very glad to be here.
I love it. Okay, so let's start with you, Mackenzie. What are your thoughts on maximizing nutritional value in our food through soil?
You know, there's a common misconception that a bunch of billionaires are escaping Earth to space, and simply not true. In order for humans to do anything in space, we have to take our biology with us. And when we think about what's happening in soil, the reality is we don't know. 90+% of the microbiology in soil is a mystery to us, but that's where our nutrition comes from. And so as we think about going into space, we're using soil-based systems, we're using soil microbiology, studying minerals and nutrients, algae, bacteria, what really makes life on Earth thrive. And we're taking that technology to space and studying how to make it resilient and build it into ecologies that support life.
Really cool. So Joseph, most of us here, even if we hadn't before, now know about bugs as a sustainable source of protein from some of the delicious treats that we've had over the last few days. Why do we need to normalize bugs as a source of protein? And also, why bugs in space? Like, I'm glad you're here, but...
Yeah, but why, Joseph? Why are you here?
Yeah, so let me try to unpack this a little bit. But, you know, at the rate that we are using the world's resources, the natural resources, we are at a tipping point where we will need to address how we will sustainably produce enough food for the burgeoning global population. And so in 2013, the UN's FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, issued a report, Edible Insects, Future Prospects for Food and Feed Security. And they don't claim that this is a silver bullet that will save the world, but rather it's like among the portfolio of solutions that we can incorporate. And the idea of eating insects means not to give everything else up, but rather if you were to eat insects just once a week, even that would have a great impact on the environment. So there's a tendency to think in terms of extremes, but what we're trying to say is that we are in addition to what you can have in your diet with over 2,000 types of edible insects with wildly different flavor profiles, textures, and functionality. And one of the things that I really appreciate and enjoy about sharing this message is that it's one of hope and optimism. It's one that we can dream the impossible, and we can really be able to stretch the only limitations we have with edible insects is with our own imagination. And so when you think about bugs and space, like, yeah, why is this bug guy talking on the space panel? Didn't you compete and not even make it to the second round? Yes, that is indeed true. With great respect to my team, we put so much hard work into that, and a big tip of the hat to all the teams that did make it to the second round. And how humbling to be approached by the Methuselah Foundation to be the culinary advisor. And I think that a big part is that we've been so successful in transforming a global generational mindset towards edible insects. And so to what Mackenzie was speaking about, this isn't a tech race or a vanity project with deep space travel, but we want to find solutions. How can we apply this technology to address food security and sustainability? And I think part of the success that we've had with edible insects can also maybe translate to deep space travel and help bring the humanity to the food, something that's been a really big part of our conversation here with all the people that have been involved in Food Tank and Zero Hunger, Zero Waste. All of these ideas speak to the heart of the future of food. And to me, that's where the heart is, the humanity. And I think that's where the connection between bugs and space is for me.
Thank you. And I think it's really important to remember too that sometimes here in America, we do innovative things and we're like, oh, we're so innovative and we're doing this new thing with food. But there are many cultures that rely on bugs for their, big source of their protein already.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, because over 80% of the world's nations and over 2 billion people regularly consume insects. And so it's not really this it's weird maybe for us as Americans culturally and maybe for Europeans, but around the world, I mean, we're actually in the minority. So good thing to think about for us.
Right, okay. So Dane, I'm hoping you can give us a little bit of historical context on why space exploration helps drive food innovation here on Earth. You can bring us back down to Earth, so to speak.
I can try a little bit. So I'll actually start on Earth before we do the space thing.
Okay.
So when I think about exploration, one of the most common things that it's synonymous with scarcity, right? So there's a lot of people who are, dealing with food scarcity right now around the world, but just about everyone who's an explorer has to consider their food supply, not just in terms of staying alive, but also, staying sane and not eating your crewmates. So if you go back to, just for fun, if you go back to the 1800s, you'll see a really interesting parabolic spike in terms of life expectancy, and also.
Can you just hold on, tell everybody here what a parabolic spike would be?
Oh, it's like a hockey stick.
Okay, great, thank you.
I hear you, Alexander. He needs standard citations.
You don't do the sound, it doesn't work right. So in the middle of the 1800s, you see that happen, and that's essentially because of food preservation and new different forms of food preservation. So this French guy named Nicolas Appert came up with food bottling, which then was kind of surreptitiously handed over to the English. Nobody knows exactly. But then they ended up with canning, and that's what enabled a huge maritime boom, which then enabled a global ice trade, which then enabled people who didn't happen to live in a place that was really, really cold part of the year to actually keep their food for longer without having to cure it. And so because of food preservation at a time, that enabled exploration and enabled life expectancies and intelligence to increase in the 1800s at a staggering rate. And so for me, when I look at space travel and the unbelievable impossible scarcity, unbelievable high risk, but also really, really specific constraints. Everything has to be hyper engineered because if anything goes wrong in a really bad situation, it's a perfect place to test out new technologies. So everybody knows about all the cool stuff that's happening because of space, but we're in an interesting situation right now because the current paradigm of shelf-stable foods is no longer going to work on a 3 to 5 year mission, right? People talk about the potential of actually having to, if you were to do that, you'd have to send the food ahead of the astronauts because the mass is so incredibly high. But by the time you do that, the nutrients will have degraded to the point where they're not going to be viable for long enough to actually really do the mission right, or you're going to end up with such an incredibly small amount of variety that you're going to end up in that situation. So sorry, I'll go faster. So what that necessitates is in situ food production. You have to grow the vast majority of the food right where you're at. So that's another way of saying farm to table, except the farm is like the refrigerator and everything's in there. So I think it's really cool because if you can deliver on this premise, it can create a completely new setup for decentralized food production back here on Earth, because it's absolutely necessary up there.
Very, like, these are very complex things to think about, but I love the connection and the way that you guys are breaking this down for everyone. So, Florina, why is it critical to drive both international and global participation in the Deep Space Food Challenge?
Well, one, I don't know if everyone is familiar here, but when you're in space, your taste buds go through change. Your whole physiology goes through massive change, and food tastes very different than microgravity. In fact, the common complaint among astronauts is that they don't really taste the food. They want it to be spicier. They want more flavor profiles. And the only way to achieve spicier, more diverse flavor profiles is to have spicier and more diverse people making that food. And so, that seems logical, but to put into context, only 10% of NASA's food menu is viable for a mission to Mars, just 10%. And so we need real solutions. NASA and all these space agencies need solutions. And what I love about deep space food is that it democratizes access. It democratizes the way that we come to those solutions. So anyone, no matter what their background is, across the globe can make a team and compete in this challenge. And internationally, I'm very passionate about that because obviously, international. But I'm passionate about this too, is because the technologies that these teams develop should be used here on Earth to address food insecurity and world hunger now and where they are. What's going to work in Africa will not work in Asia. What will work in Southeast Asia will not work in the Ukraine. And so those people need to be designing food systems that work for them in their environments and with their own, knowing their cultural behaviors. I'm very into design thinking, and that to me just seems like a natural thing to do. So it's very close to our heart to drive the international piece of this challenge. And by the way, we are building that international prize. So NASA is awarding $1 million to US teams. Canada is awarding a very similar prize pot. The international prize pot is at 0. And so we're working to build that. And we can discuss more on that later. Yeah.
So how will some of this innovation get back to the average person? So it's this big challenge. Is it going to NASA after that? Is some of the lessons learned going to be shared with nonprofits or governments or other people who are trying to make these changes in terms of food insecurity and sustainability?
That's an interesting question. So when NASA develops stuff, a lot of times it ends up in the public domain. We're very generous about that. The way that the prize is structured is that all competitors keep all of their IP. NASA just wants to be able to negotiate in good faith for a license to that technology. So, I mean, this is probably reductive, but I would say a lot of it is a question of economics of it. So they could take it to space, but if by some chance it's not quite a home run for that sort of thing, they can bring it to Earth, repackage it, reproductize it, and it's tough to build stuff for space. It's incredibly hard to do. So if you can do it up there, it's probably not going to be wild and crazy to do it back.
Space is in New York City. If you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. Yeah. You have some thoughts?
To your question, the agricultural system that we're taking to the International Space Station next year is based on an invention that my father brought in. We call it GeoGrow. It's a soil-filled, centrally irrigated, revolving cylinder. So we grow plants in 3D with soil and gravity. And in space, that gives us the ability to grow more plants in less space with less labor. And to this point, my father was actually reading an article in Scientific American in the 70s that was talking about NASA trying to grow food in space. It was talking about the advantages of gravitational effects or gravastimulation on plant growth. So our experiment to the space station is both to learn about the gravitational effects on plant growth, why plants take up more nutrients, grow bigger and faster, live longer, but simultaneously to study, what we can do with gardens and farms and grows and ranches on Earth in a lens of a completely self-contained, resilient system for space. And so whether you're talking about a tropical island or a container ship at sea or a spacecraft. You've got to bring everything you're going to use with you, consider all of the variables, create a conducive environment. And when you start thinking about biological inputs, you can't run down to the farm store on the moon. So you really have to consider how to bring an ecology with you. And these are just frankly things we've never considered as a species before. So it's a really exciting time.
Fascinating.
So for those of you not aware of like what the requirements for this module is, imagine having a 2 cubic meter space, like a refrigerator, powered by an average pull of 1500 watts, which is like a space heater, that can help provide the sustenance for a crew of people, 4 astronauts going on a deep space mission. And then you apply that technology into like food deserts or areas that's like ravaged by war, or in areas where we need that kind of food production. Minimum input for maximum output. Those are the technologies that we want to do. We want to spark the imagination of children, students, scientists, educators, artists, and like really have this be an interdisciplinary collaborative project where we can really dream and imagine something new.
Florina, I was just going to say yes, absolutely. And for the first time, you have food scientists working with engineers, working with college students who are into agriculture. For the first time, these people are coming together to work at solving a real problem with real requirements. As a product manager, that's a dream. And especially if you have the opportunity for NASA, for instance, to be your very first customer, for this Deep Space Food Challenge to act as an accelerator, get some limelight on you so that you can get connected to funding and support to spin off your own startup. That is part of the intention of the Deep Space Food Challenge and part of why it's so powerful.
Just super quickly, it's obviously it's not an abstract thing, but also it's surprisingly productized because we care so much about acceptability, which is like a proper term for how palatable something is, but also the user experience. Astronauts are very busy people, so they don't really have a lot of time to fix stuff that breaks. It's actually got to function, require very, very little maintenance and cleaning and that sort of thing. So
more importantly, they all like good food.
Right,
like
who
the rest
doesn't? Well, thank you all so much. That was such an interesting conversation. I can't say that I've ever had one like that. So we're wrapping up the day. Really appreciate those of you who have been with us all day. Next, we have a treat. We're going to hear some spoken word poetry from Carr, who will close out a fantastic day of programming. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, y'all, that was the panel, and I'm really excited that Florina and other people that have been on that panel who are able to are going to come join us here on sort of the after party, the live after party, to answer all your questions. There's been a really robust chat going on the side, which I love, and there's so many incredible thoughts and questions and speakers, and so I'm really excited to get our mission directors aboard so we can continue the conversation.
Tova, just a point of order. Is it possible you could mod me or Older so we can get some more people from the audience here on the stage? Because there's a really great ape space community here that I'm sure would really like to participate in the discussion.
Yeah, definitely. Are you not mod?
Not right now. Just tap on either me or Older's profile and
Gotcha. Making you both a moderator right now. Everybody bear with me. I am a Clubhouse neophyte, but not after tonight.
Oh, good.
All right, guys. Please invite all the most amazing people to the space. I've been messaging a few of you guys, asking you guys to come to the stage and start talking after this.
So cool stuff happening South by Southwest. How many people are physically there right now?
I don't know. Tamara,
yeah, I heard that there were like 20,000 people in town. I don't know if that's true, but I can say that the streets have been packed. There's parties everywhere. There's so many different conferences going on at the same time. There's obviously the Sustainable Food Conference. There's also a film conference, music conference, a tech one, a blockchain. It's just been nonstop. Oh, and here, who walked backstage into the VIP room? We have Florina and Dane right now. Hi, everyone. How's it going?
It's going great, Florina. We're so glad you're here. You guys made some incredible points, and we have just such a wonderful, diverse group of people, of scientists and people in the space community and people who are deep into food and nutrition, all here having great conversations. There's a lot of questions and a lot of people who want to interact with you guys. So I'm really excited to have you here.
Amazing. So if you can give me and Dane a couple minutes, we're going to try to go to the rooftop where it's a little quieter. And I hear the Wi-Fi connection is pretty stable, so we'll see how this goes. Yeah. We'll come.
Fantastic.
We'll rejoin you in a
the
minute.
back channel chat is being used a lot on this with things. So if you could skim through that on your way up with stuff, I'm sure you'll have a lot of really good questions from there that happened during the talk.
Perfect, Chris. Thank you.
And Florina, you got some just mad street cred because everyone said that you and Dane were very well spoken.
Oh,
so it's very true.
That's very humbling. That was a bit of a nervous wreck, but I'm coming down. Coming down on the road.
Couldn't tell.
Could not tell at all.
So one of the things that happened is there was some assets from some astronauts that they were talking about the Deep Space Food Challenge. I think there was like Scott Kelly and a few other folk or something. But I wonder if we could maybe post some of that for the room here for people to see, because there's some really good stuff from that. We'll see if we can get those. But let's see. So maybe we just open up to the audience now, Tova?
Yeah, please. I would love to open up to the audience. I know one of the big questions that we saw a lot was about where phase 1 and phase 2 were. So if anyone wants to talk, I know one of the speakers that we have, I'm not going to say this correctly, Phenom Bagley. And she is one of the winners of our phase 1. We're so glad to have you here, but I'd love if you wanted to talk through a little bit about that process. I think it's a great place to start because there have been a lot of questions on the back channel about phase 1 and phase 2.
Hi, Tova. It's very nice to meet you. And hi, everyone. My name is Phenom. You pronounced it correctly. I was actually just at South by Southwest. I'm currently at the Austin airport. So if I go out, let me know. My team won phase 1 of the Deep Space Food Challenge. Thankfully, the type of work that we do in our day job was sort of in the same realm, and so how we went about it is that we really listened to what the people working at NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, the astronauts, and other types of advisors were telling us, right? The fact that food access for long-term missions like going to Mars, which could take 2.5, 3 years, is not where it needs to be for us to even begin to think about sending humans there. And so thinking about all the different aspects of creating food sources or ways to transform food in microgravity environments or partial gravity environments was at the source of the project that we all worked on, all the different teams. And so creating variety, creating food that is not only, palatable, but appetizing and delicious, right? During the panel, you heard Chef Joseph Yoon talk about food, talk about eating insects, and he does it in a way that makes it sound more appetizing than just eating insects for sustainability's sake. And I think thinking about the future of space, from going from survival to creating an environment where the astronauts can live nicely, but also thrive up there, is really at the source of this challenge. So very happy to be here and happy to answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for stepping in. I know you're at the airport, but it's so valuable. Can you tell us a little bit about what your team did in phase 1 and the prototype or the idea that you came up with?
Sure. So I run a design firm. So we're a bunch of designers, architects, engineers that are used to building things that sound completely crazy, right? And so the concept that we came up with was, how do we create a kitchen in a microgravity environment. So I use the word kitchen, which is in contrast to what you typically have up there. It's aboard the ISS. Typically, it's called a galley, right? A galley is more of a military, kind of like an airplane type of word that is used to describe the space in which you unpack food or you mix it and you eat pretty quickly and then you go on with life. And so transforming the idea of a galley into a kitchen really opened the door to different ways of cooking or growing food or transforming food from raw materials into something that's actually appetizing. And so the concept that we came up with was a system that fits in the volume that was given to us, which is about the size of a refrigerator. And basically, it has 4 different devices or machines in it. One is a microgreens a place where you could grow microgreens, and we also had a machine that helps us create sauces and creams, because really the difference in textures is going to be very important to add to the diet of all of these astronauts. So from shelf-stable material, you can transform them into like a chocolate ganache or a mayonnaise or other types of sauces that you can put in the food that you add you had up there. We also had a bioreactor that would grow algae. So different types of algae, blue algae, red algae, and green algae. And from these algae, we came up with a number of recipes, savory and sweet, that you can create after you've grown these algae. You can mix them with different types of ingredients, dry ingredients, and create bites. And these bites not only are delicious, we tried them, but they also help protecting us from dangerous levels of radiation, which is a known problem for a trip to Mars. And then the last part of the machine that we created was, well, one of the most ancestral ways of cooking food is to grill it. And as you can imagine, creating an open fire barbecue in an oxygen-rich environment in space is about the last thing that NASA, Kenya Space Agency, wants us to put up there. So we decided to create that using lasers. So you basically have a freeze-dried piece of meat or vegetable that you rehydrate with hot water, and then you place it in this device that creates grill marks on top of the food, and really creates this delicious flavor on top of it using the Maillard effect, and it really makes the food appetizing. So really creating this whole system that helps create a variety of food for the astronauts to have fun with. I'm going to stop here.
I absolutely loved everything you had to say, because it was just such a thoughtful and deep approach to sort of the psychology of food, as well as the execution of how to get there. So just thank you so much. I'm so excited because now I see Florina and Dane. Now they're here, so we can hand it over to them as well to communicate. And we have a few amazing people from the crowd now that have awesome questions for you guys.
Hey guys, good to be here. I have a surprise. We found another winner of phase 1.
Welcome. They're everywhere.
yeah. From the team from Tufts, the Deep Space Entomoculture. Want to say hi?
Yes, hello. My name is Sophie. I am a PhD student at Tufts University, and I was part of the Deep Space Entomoculture team. So our idea is creating meat products grown from insect cells to grow insect muscle and fat to create familiar meat products. So it's exciting to see the excitement from the crowd, and it was really cool to see the panel at South by Southwest today.
It's really cool. I just wanted to say too, because I don't want to put words in your mouth or anything, but one of the things that is a common objection to using insect protein is that it has a very kind of, it's small, it's got a lot of chitin in it, but this is something that you can have much more flexibility in terms of its flavor profile and texture profile.
Yeah, exactly. So it's different than edible insects, which have a lot of great properties on their own, but this is kind of a more plastic, I guess, source. So we can kind of grow a lot of these cells and hopefully engineer them in different ways that would create the nutritional properties that you would need in space.
Cool. Thanks. I'm not an interviewer. I'm officially out of questions.
No, but I do see in a lot of the back channel, I did wanted to address just quickly for people, there's a lot of collaboration happening, which I love and I'm so excited. And I pinned a link at the top, which goes to the Deep Space Food Challenge, sort of a sub website where we know that there's a lot of people here that would love to get involved and talk to us and ask questions deeper and maybe connect with each other. And so there's a form you can sign up. So click the link as well and stay informed. And I'll go back to Florina.
If she is physically there. I know there's a lot of activity happening on the other side.
I'm sorry.
Well, one thing I just wanted to bring up, Dane, there's a lot of questions for people that want to get actively involved in the Deep Space Food Challenge. Even while we're in the chat channels, they're having lots of cool ideas and concepts. I understand that we're currently on phase 2. What is the process for people that want to get more involved in the food challenge if they just found out about it today?
Well, if they send me an email, then we can talk and try to. So registration is technically closed at this point, but I think teams can still. They'll be able to add members to their teams. So if they reach out to me, then that's probably the best way to start that kind of intake process. I wish I had a better answer actually for that. I think so. But if they reach out to us directly, then we can see what we can do if there's some interest there. Yeah. Also, I want to apologize. For some reason, my back channel thing isn't working at all. So feel free to just throw questions my way, and I'll do what I can to answer them.
Excellent. Yeah, check the request side.
Well, thanks, Chris. Vignesh and Sonia Thumb. Oh, okay. Somebody says hello, dear.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Shane.
Vignesh, hi.
Oh, here we go.
Can I audible?
Yes, Vignesh, please.
Yeah, ma'am. Could I explain my project about a HPP pressure in this?
Sure, we're going to keep it a little bit on the briefer side, but feel free with things. So explain a little bit kind of what your concept is, and then we'll talk to Dane essentially offline to figure out essentially how to get plugged in.
Yeah, and I have a question for the Deep Space Challenge.
Okay, excellent. So take it away, Vignesh.
Yeah, the Dogelon thermal process technology, as known as ultra pressure technology or ultra hydrostatic pressure, commonly at or above 100 MPa, established to inactive the enzymes without flavor and nutrition degradant, applied in food and industry to produce high quality foods, microbiology, safe, fresh, nutrient and innovative. Intensive pressure about 400 to 600 MPa. But what is the use of in this concept is in history of HPPT, which was introduced in 1899, the field of hydrostatic pressure on food. Why we can use this technology in nowadays to improve the food for the shelf life of the food, increase it for more days by using this technology without the addition of chemical and flavors. This may be safe for the astronauts, and also it contains more nutrition than we compared to the agriculture products that we produce in Mars. But the thing is that the question is about how to maintain this pressure inside the food. What is the use of pressure? The use of pressure is the microorganism are adapted to certain pressure. It is about the certain pressure the microorganism get growth, but during the certain temperature it becomes inactive and the growth is stopped completely because of the pressure inside. Nowadays, we are using the lychee fruit by using this technology and improves the shelf life of the lychee fruit. And also in nowadays we are using in milk products and also so many on.
That is really cool. Vignesh, I imagine there's a lot of challenges for adapting that into a space context. That'd be really some interesting stuff to solve. I sent you a contact information for Dane, so you can get plugged in directly onto team stuff with things. But thank you for coming and sharing that with us. Hashtag pressure. That sounds really cool.
Sir, my mail ID was kmnagarajan00@gmail.com.
Fantastic. If you could send me a text message with that, I'll connect you with Dane. Fantastic. Thanks for that, Vignesh. And Nistan, you had some questions. Take it away.
Yes.
Yeah, and just for Vignesh, make sure to go to deepspacefoodchallenge.org.
We have the link pinned at the top of the room. All right, take it away, Nistan.
But yeah, my question is, did you guys see any good ideas for a deep space drink challenge? Or like how would people make drinks?
Oh,
in space.
How does
they
Matt
just
feel about the alcohol there? That's actually a really good question. Is we're having more space tours, and that's going to be very important.
Yeah, like are we all going to have bottles or something, or like hermetically sealed new Starbucks cups?
Yeah, you're gonna actually have like a beer cup permanently affixed to your head, and just that's basically just straws.
You know, like how they have
beer funnels work, right?
You know how at NASCAR they have like the beer helmets where just they suck it in with everything. We need to have those for astronauts. You know, that's if astronauts can have a certain blood alcohol content for long duration missions, how will this be survivable, right?
Well, I think it's been a wink, wink, nudge, nudge thing that there's been alcohol in space probably since. Well, maybe not exactly the beginning, but pretty early on. So at a certain point, it'll have to get normalized pretty quickly, I would imagine, since space tourism is kicking in.
There's always Jello shots, right? Like that would work. No problem.
There's no way Russians have been in space without vodka. Like there's no way.
They have. There's actually a story for one of their ethanol and liquid oxygen rockets that the calculations for how much fuel was being used up got messed up because it turned out that the engineers, because the ethanol was pure, there was no other additives, the engineers were literally drinking it, so that's what accounted for slightly less than optimal performance.
I love that.
This explains so much.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? You have a whole bunch of engineers that can figure out the exact dilution, and they can make spirits or vodka or mixed drink.
You know, like there's a thing for like the most expensive drinks that you can bottle and serve on Earth. Like here's the wines or some alcohol or brandy or something like that. They come in these fancy cases. Man, having something that was brewed in space with the still and everything, and have like a little microbrewery, and then having it, you know, have its cargo depart back down from whatever space station it's on. Man, people would pay a premium for that. And just even having it on your shelf and going, hey, when did I drink this? It came from low Earth orbit, or this one came from Mars. This is a lunar brew. You know, just be crazy. Just be a show off.
If anybody wants to start a space whiskey business, call me.
Just it finishes off with a hint of solar storm.
Yeah. And Jim smell.
The cosmic rays.
I do have a question for you, for Florina and Dane, a little bit talking to, I know there's the traditional prize, but there's so much interest here on the different aspects of this. And I think talking to what the Methuselah Foundation is doing with the international prize would give everyone a real clue on like the ability to shed light on all these other cool projects that aren't in the traditional challenge winners.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, there was an amazing, especially, I mean, in phase one, the number of teams, I can't remember off the top of my head how many international teams there were, but it was a huge number from so many different countries, which was so amazing for us to see. It made us so happy to see. And it was sad that because obviously it's a federally funded, that that NASA can't give money to people who aren't US citizens or permanent residents. So we did what we could for phase one, and we were able to give awards to two really, really cool groups. One was Solar Foods, which is out of Finland, and they have they basically make protein from the air. It's a CO2 process, which is it's actually kind of been around for a while. It's based on some work that NASA did a couple decades ago, I want to say. And then another group that was out of Australia, which they worked actually with a French institute, the Paul Bocuse Culinary Institute, and they have just a hyper efficient growing. I don't know exactly how to describe it, except that the actual structure of it itself changes in order to maximize the actual food output. So it basically grows and shrinks depending on what stage of life the whatever they're trying to grow is actually in, which kind of makes sense. And so we did that for phase 1, but for phase 2, we're kind of back at we're back at the beginning again. And so what we want to do is for the international winners of this phase, we want to do the same thing that we did for the first phase as much as we can. We just financially support them at the same level that NASA is supporting the U.S. teams. So there's a lot of different ways for us to get there. It's a little difficult for me to say exactly what the scale of that is going to be this time around, since we don't know. The registration is basically that process is pretty much winding down. So we're very close to knowing what the size of the community is going to be this time. And we have more time this time, quite a bit more time in phase 2 in order to actually check all those boxes. But it's a long-winded way of saying that we certainly could use as much support from private industry or from just folks who are interested in what we're trying to do and what NASA is trying to do, so that we can support all the amazing teams that are just happen to not be from the United States. So there's really, really, truly incredible work being done. So that was probably way too many words, but that's excellent. That's where we're at.
Dane, are you okay taking a couple questions? From
Yeah, of course. I'll do my best.
Okay, fantastic. Ariel, take it away. I saw in the chat that you want to ask a question here.
Yeah, so we are actually a team that competed in phase 1, though we didn't win money. We attempted to register for phase 2 as well. However, we ended up changing our team name because we're now actually filing for like an LLC officially, and we're hitting the market soon, which is all very exciting. So I guess really, we haven't heard back in terms of registration. Should we still be waiting? Is there something more we should be doing?
Oh, you're probably good. So I'll reach out to you. I will double check as soon as I get off this Clubhouse thing and make sure that you're good. But I wouldn't fret. So we haven't completely closed everything out. If there's some documentation that's missing or something like that, I'll make sure that it all gets in. Okay. So
Okay,
expect an email from me soon. Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for reaching out.
Fantastic. Let's see. We also are having some questions from the audience related to what are some of the things that we can expect for some of the phase 2 people with things like is there what's some of the upcoming events and some of the dates that are related to that?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so there's at the end, basically the process is like this. I think next week we're going to be in the next 10 days or so, we're going to be onboarding all of the teams to a new app that we made to make it much easier for them to submit their different progress reports across the life cycle of phase 2. So expect to hear more about that very soon. And then what we've got is from the end of March through May, that's the time period the teams have available to work on their progress reports. So for teams that participated in phase 1, whether they won or didn't, they have the opportunity to just basically describe where they're at in their current process, and also talk about what they're updating or what they're changing about what they had originally proposed. And then I hope I don't get the timeline wrong here because it's off the top of my head. But so first of all, I just encourage everybody to just look at the rules, because it's all laid out there. But I want to say that in August, after that initial progress report phase, up to the end of May, in August, then there's a pre-testing plan, which is essentially talking about how they're actually going to go about testing their prototype and making sure that it's producing safe food and that sort of thing. And then in December, there will be a down select, which basically decides whether or not it just determines who the finalists are going to be. And then we go into the actual kitchen level demonstration in March, in which actual food samples are available, and judges will actually go out to the teams and see what they're working on. So it's a pretty long timeline this time. It's running for a full year after registration.
Excellent. And we have a number of people in the audience that are brand new to Clubhouse. I'm seeing a lot of birthday hats and such there with things. So for people that would like to ask questions with things, feel free to either put it in the chat or come up to the stage. Just click the raise hand button if you want to come to the stage and ask some questions. I think we had a question from Marwin here. Martin, you want to take it away? Is he up here on the stage still? Martin, here, we'll get you up on the stage here so you can ask your question. But yeah, anyone else want to ask a question here? Comments, thoughts?
One plug I can actually chime in here. I know Dane was talking a little bit about the international prize, and Florina talked a little bit about the international prize. If you have any desire to support or have some ideas in regards to partnerships or things like that, you can email admin@deepspacefoodchallenge.org, and we'll put that here in Clubhouse. But would love to connect with you offline to hear your ideas and see how we can make that happen as far as international support goes.
Excellent. We have a question from the audience about why only 10% of the food going to Mars is viable. Dane or Florina or someone else in the Deep Space Food Challenge team, do you have some answers to that one?
Yeah, I can try to do that one. It's basically just the micronutrients degrade because of radiation. I mean, they degrade anyway, but it's much worse up there. So it just goes very, very quickly. And so when they say 10%, that's after, I want to say that's after 3 years. It's either 3 or 5, which is a pretty big difference. But basically for a Martian mission, it takes quite a while to get there. And so the likelihood is that if you were to do, if they were to follow the current kind of standard of shelf-stable foods, they would have to send that huge amount of food, which shockingly for a crew of 4 is, I mean, it's like several tons worth of food, which seems insane to me, but that's what the estimate is. And so they would probably send that ahead of the astronauts. And so by the time the astronauts actually were consuming that food, it would probably already be 2 years old, which means that for a 3 to 5 year Martian mission, it's only going to be a couple of years before that food is basically not viable, or the vast majority of that food is not viable. So you end up with, some tried and true stuff that really just constitutes like, I think it's 10% of what the current ISS menu is. So, so it's kind of like this. So about half of the ISS menu is stuff that requires resupply, and then the other half is stuff that's shelf stable. So as soon as you leave low Earth orbit, you lose a huge amount of the food options that you have, and then of course the longer your mission, the more your food just simply becomes non-viable. And so at that point, you're just left with the most boring, depressing pantry in the world, and so it's just terrible for psychology. It just doesn't work, and so you have to grow as much of the food as you possibly can locally. And of course, the most obvious thing in the world is you can have a mission and it might barely succeed, but of course you can't colonize. So all of these problems, if you can solve them indefinitely for that crew of 4, you can probably scale up and start doing it for an actual colony.
Could you talk more about the weight aspect? Because with current engineering and a lot of rocket launches, every gram matters, every kilogram adds exponential amounts of cost. Even with some of the newest SpaceX rockets and stuff, weight is still a very large design parameter. I think it's like 300 kilograms to about a ton for 1 year's of supply for a single person. And obviously, if you're sending it to Mars, it's going to be a bit of an issue, but in situ is also its own challenges. Maybe you could talk more about like sending food versus growing in space.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's probably other people in this room who actually know much more about this than I do, but because they actually had to design for these challenges. But yeah, like I said, I think they estimated for a crew of 4 is going to end up being something like 12 tons, which is really, really crazy. And at least for the food challenge, the constraints were very, very small. There wasn't any specific mass constraints, which was interesting because I think they really wanted to try to keep things as open as possible in terms of the weight consideration, but the volume was constrained because they know how, roughly how large the craft is going to be. So I think for phase 1, it was 2 cubic meters. And I think for phase 2, it's actually a little bit smaller. I think they're being a little bit more aggressive.
Hi, this is Dale. If I could ask a question in 2-part. I'm curious as to whether or not there's any, and this is a little bit out of my expertise. I'm curious as to whether or not there's a longer range plan to possibly grow food on the moon using something like the regolith as a barrier for radiation or something, and then shipping to Mars long term. And the second question I have, if you'll entertain it, you can pick either question to answer. The other question I have is, with the large amount of waste for pre-grown food that's launched orbital, what do you think is the required amount that you have to be able to capture and repurpose for fertilizer to recycle into a food production continuum or ecosystem? And thank you for letting me ask the questions. This is really interesting stuff. Thank you.
Well, those are fantastic questions. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not as much of a subject matter expert as I would need to be in order to really give serious answers to that. I mean, I can say that what is encouraged is, of course, closed loop systems that are extraordinarily efficient. And so pretty much everything is going to be, as much as possible, is going to be recycled, because you're trying to maximize maximize outputs for minimal inputs. And of course, this challenge isn't specifically about actually establishing a colony. So you're pretty much expected to bring everything with you that you might need in order to produce food, and they kind of leave it at that. The one thing that they do is they allow for exploded and compact, I guess you could say, deployments of the food systems. So in other words, if it's functional on the spacecraft, but it has to, let's say, fit through a certain doorway or occupy a certain amount of space, it can be expanded if you were to actually take it outside of the craft. So, I mean, they are thinking ahead about that to some extent, but they're not asking anybody to actually, full on do, Matt Damon in The Martian and actually, set up an actual, grow system on the moon or on Mars.
It's important to consider for these sorts of challenges, the number of components to tackle is astronomical. Literally, there's everything from the engineering to the cultural aspects to the finance, et cetera. Especially as NASA is trying to stimulate more private industry in space in general. This has been one of those sticking points between standard government things where hey, you're gonna do this because you're a national hero, versus hey, if you're actually going to pay for a luxury experience in space, having bad food isn't going to cut it. If you're going to colonies for long term and you're going to say, but I have to eat that mush every day, that's not going to cut it. Some of the videos I've seen from some of the astronauts have been amazing when they're saying it's like, if we're going to do other solar system, if we're going to do other planets in the solar system, we need to have food that's actually going to be making it something we can actually live with. And I think that's really exciting because it means that the opportunities to develop something not just for space, but also leads to a lot of breakthroughs here on Earth. I think Dane can probably tell you more about some of the technologies that were created originally for food challenges and such, and how it kind of diffused into all sorts of other sectors in society. But for your specific question about the recycling component, something really cool to consider is that for that expanding mass that Dane is talking about, some of the one of the more longer running space station experiments they've been running for, I think, the last 4 or 5 years, is they've actually put a bunch of different seeds. I think they have like a few hundred of them in different compartments on the outside of the space station. The really cool part about this is that the pressurized parts of the space station are, they're shielded. They have like things that it's space is a premium. But what's cool is that when you can put it on the outside of the structure, it potentially means a lot more options for what you can do for long-term food storage and also for biological material. The thing is that we don't know how seeds behave in the higher radiation cosmic ray environment. And so what they're doing is they're essentially artificially weathering these seeds under accelerated conditions in the outside of the space station in different configurations. And what's cool about that data is that if it comes back positive and says, yeah, the seeds are fine, just throw them in some soil and they're good to go, or throw them in like a simu soil or some such, that's going to massively change a lot of the logistics of what you actually need for your storage compartment. So it's very exciting stuff.
Thank you both very much for that. If I could ask the follow-up.
Sure, go for it, and then we'll follow up.
Yeah, and I only want to dominate the stage. Just want to ask one last question that's related. So is it possible to leverage, and I'm not talking about the contest, I just find the topic fascinating, more so than the contest, which is a great contest. But in general, is it possible, because we're facing so many food crises here on Earth, is it possible to combine the objectives of food and space, I'll just leave it as food and space, for efficiency, with food crises here on Earth, like funding from the UN or funding from different governments to increase yields, for example, things like that. That's the last question I'll ask. I'm just curious if there's a way to leverage those types of funding with your developing technology to create kind of a win-win. Hey, thank you very much for letting me ask that question. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, that's exactly the right question. And yeah, the hope is that absolutely. I think it's a lot of it's just a question of economics and how you can actually deploy this stuff at scale, how much you can tailor it for specific communities, how applicable, or not applicable, but how well you can adapt it just for actual regular people at home. But it honestly just kind of depends on how quickly we're able to do it, because it is decentralized food production, whether you do it at a community level where your local grocery store is producing the vast majority of its food, or it's a little bit more spread out. Let's say it's actually literally it's in your house or in your apartment building, whatever it ends up being. I mean, we've seen so much from just any kind of scarce. Oh, sorry. Oh, got some people. We've seen so much technology transferred from NASA, especially when it comes to food systems. And yeah, absolutely. I think certainly the hope is that, especially for environments, they call them like food deserts, especially in environments where there is particularly like remote communities, they simply just do not have enough food. This is exactly the sort of thing that could be adapted for their situation and deployed to them, so long as it was actually, it actually worked with their culture and the specifics of what they needed. But yeah, absolutely. Sorry, that was really long-winded. There's a bunch of people around here. I couldn't think straight.
Excellent. I think we had a question from Marwan. Do you want to ask that, Marwan?
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Go for it.
What if we used the cryptobiosis of tardigrades on growing crops, so we could grow stress-resistant crops, maybe in space and maybe possibly on Mars?
Oh, Chris, did you have a thought? That's a really cool idea.
I was gonna say, Dan, you got tardigrades here? I mean, I watched I think the first season of Star Trek Discovery had a plot around this or something where they are growing space tardigrades and using it to grow their space mushrooms. By the way, for people that are less familiar with them, tardigrades are amazing. They're like they're small little bugs that they're also called water bears. They're basically, as far as we know, they're one of the most indestructible organisms known to man. They can survive extremely high pressure, low pressure, vacuum, extreme high temperature, low temperature. They're basically unkillable. But one of the things that they've also found is that they can also survive on spacecraft, to the point where it even like exposed vacuum of space for extended periods of time, which has a lot of implications for when they're saying, well, this is what we know about that can survive this. Maybe this is implications for finding life on other plants, etc. As far as I know, outside of like, Dan, there was a whole bug conversation earlier. Do we have anyone talking about GMO bugs for space or tardigrades for food supplies? I mean, that could be something kind of interesting. Dan might be on the other side there.
Yeah, sorry. If only tardigrades weren't so small.
Exactly. We need to make giant tardigrades.
Quite a lot. Recent research has been.
I'm sorry, Marwan, could you say that again?
Research has shown that we can make just this improve. be start using the same process, the cryptobiosis.
Marwin, you're cutting out. Yeah, the basic techniques of cryptobiosis might be really relevant for the insect conversation. Marwin, you're cutting it pretty bad, but I think we got the crux of what you're saying with stuff with cryptobiology. There's some really cool things that might be influential there. I saw going off mic. I think I saw David Goebel. David, would you like to continue the conversation here with things? Just so you go off mic for a moment.
Sure. I just wanted to respond to Dale. One of the things that's important to keep in mind is that almost none of the participants in this food challenge, even the winners, who are not already well funded, would have a good shot at being viable businesses unless they had a market to sell to. And the last time we checked, there wasn't anybody on Mars. So that's not a very big target opportunity for markets. So those results really need to be applicable to Earth primarily, in my view anyway. Also in the challenge, at least in the first phase of the challenge, the gravity that they were expected to be dealing with, the parameter of the gravities was 1G. That sounds a lot like Earth. And just finally, the Methuselah Foundation, which is the partner of NASA, is only interested in this in light of our mission, which is to extend the healthy human lifespan. And so most of those humans are on Earth. So we're very focused on the dual use of these technologies. And like NASA, which is charged ultimately with providing benefits to citizens of the United States, like them, we want to provide those same kinds of benefits, not just nationally, but internationally, because people tend to be all over this planet, and the needs are greater around the world. So anyway, thank you for letting me make those comments.
Fantastic. Well, we're very grateful to have you here.
What I mean is maybe we could use the cryptobiosis that tardigrades use to handle those tough conditions. Maybe you can use it on plants so we can grow them in these tough conditions in space and possibly Mars.
Well, what's cool about that dual use technology, ability to prove those technologies on Earth, you do on one side, you might be able to use it on the other. So there's definitely some things for that research. I think I saw Rowena going off mic there. Rowena, want to chime in here?
Hi, thanks for inviting me up here. This is definitely very interesting, and it's nice to have it in the conversation. I specialize in human performance in terms of energy for any activities. And in my mind, any future human travel space, requires energy input to do the mission, to perform that mission. And I'm just curious in terms of food as fuel, has there been a lot of consideration where a choice of specific food that has the highest energy intake or energy input, and so that each of these future human travels, astronauts are able to sustain their energy throughout their day-to-day activities just to function and make their job a lot more easier. And like we do when we work, right? There's a certain period in time where we fall and crash. And so when it comes to designing this food or choosing the right kind of food that has the highest energy value, I'm just, is that one of the most important consideration when innovating a different way of consuming these foods? Just curious.
I'm sure some other people on the stage have something to say on this, but I have a very brief thing to contribute here. But that human bodies burn about 100 watts of energy, at any point, and you're basically a human heat engine. Even when you're under extreme exertion, it only goes up by 20-30%. Now, athletes and people that have especially large bodies, et cetera, can burn more of that energy. But unless you are in one of those extreme scenarios, the amount of energy that you use as a human being is relatively constant, unless you're under extreme exercise scenarios. Now, the reason why that's relevant is that when you start looking at the food consumption, what goes into the body, people have different food efficiencies. One thing to consider is when people talk about the taste of things, kind of they can taste it. We evolved taste buds for a reason. There's a reason there's so many nerve endings and there's so much of the brain that's devoted just to tasting things. Part of that's because at any time your body might be doing different biochemical things. It might be making certain kinds of cells. It might be responding to infection. It might be going through like a different sleep cycle. Maybe there's something happening with weight gain or weight loss. There's a lot going on. And your body is actually pretty good at being able to filter out and identify different subnutrients if you're getting it or not. Sometimes people develop extreme salt cravings or have something where they really want to have like a certain kind of sugar or some such. Well, we always have the sugar craving. But part of the sugar is specifically because sugar in fruits is a signal of very high embodied energy. Now, energy is one of the components to optimize around, but there are others like nutrition and other things. And the flavors that we taste are all slightly different between people. When women become pregnant, one of the things that happens is for many women, they'll have different extreme cravings. Part of that's because in building a baby, building a human being, you're going to need different components, different parts at different times. And because these processes are well understood at a very high level, but there's a lot of particulars that we still don't know, being able to have a large variety of different types of flavors and choices means that depending on how people's microbiome is structured or the different times and biochemical conditions that someone is under, they're going to be able to adjust their diet depending on what their body actually needs at the time. So being able to have a wide variety is going to be something that is an extremely amazing long-term thing. Now, your body can improvise with like a single monoculture crop. Potatoes are an example. There's a handful of others where if you eat the same thing day in and out for your entire life, you can theoretically survive. But that is generally considered to be an exception rather than the norm. Variety is the spice of life, and having food that has more variety is going to be really important, especially as you get to a larger number of people in space. So I don't know if that answers your question very much, but I'm sure there's somebody who will want to chime in on that one. Dane?
So this is Florina. Sorry, my phone died, so I'm on Dane's phone. Chris, were you sort of hinting around potatoes?
Maybe a little bit.
Because if anyone in this room is connected with Matt Damon, we're seriously trying to connect with him because we think it would be amazing for there to be sort of like a potato prize given his work with The Martian. Not even joking. Not even joking.
No, I agree with you. The golden potato, like it's as if you won everything. I do think that Lena has been waiting to ask a question. Lena, would you like to go ask your question?
Hello, everyone. Yes, thank you so much for setting this up. It's a great conversation. My name is Helena Vanemerf, and I have a small business and was recently invited by NASA Marshall Space Flight Center to present my company's capabilities. And I focused it on a immunity blend that I developed that has a technology readiness level of 7 that I would like to adapt into food solutions. So would love to get your input as to how you think I should move this forward.
It's a good question, Dane, or one of their Deep Space Food Challenge teams.
I'm sorry, Lena, you broke up for me the last 30 seconds. Could you condense your question?
I created an immunity blend that I would like, with a technology readiness level of 7, that I would like to adapt into a food solution for deep space missions, working with a food institute locally where I'm located here in the East Coast. So wanted to just brainstorm and see how you think, I can move this forward.
That's fantastic. So we have I don't know if you've tried to tap our community in the Deep Space Food Challenge forum on LinkedIn, but a number of folks have had success in actually posting about their need or their desire to connect with a team to help move their ideas forward. So I would suggest posting there. Otherwise, my other suggestion would be to email Dane Goebel, because he is the one closest to all of the team submissions and would know who to connect you with potentially.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Also, make sure to join the club, Small Steps and Giant Leaps. There are actually quite a lot of people here that randomly show up from NASA and various industries.
Oh yes, for people that are new to Clubhouse, there's a lot of birthday things in the audience. That goes away after a day or two after you've been on Clubhouse. But please sign up for the Small Steps and Giant Leaps Club. Alder Riley has kind of been co-hosting a number of events with us. If you click on the little green house at the very top of the screen, you can see the club. You can join. You can see some of the schedule through the week, see upcoming events, and have little reminders and such about them. But it's a very rich community of knowledge and talent and people that have all sorts of different things. This is a part of the series that's been going on where we do live listening parties for different events that are happening around the world, including launch parties. They're starting to do more of those with things for whenever SpaceX sends up rockets, etc. And the Deep Space Food Challenge is very much an extension of the space community and how intersecting with things here on Earth. So we've got a lot of crossover between a lot of good communities here. So this is a lot of the beautiful things about being in this place.
Yes, and it was so great to meet Alder in person. Actually, Phenom and I got to see the orchard right here at the front of the South by Southwest Center, right before we presented as Deep Space Food. And Chris, I have to say, Alder is 3D printing a surprise for you. So I'll be taking that back to share with you.
Very exciting.
Also, briefly back to the subject of potatoes, the main scientist that they consulted for Matt Damon's movie is actually a regular here on the club. So I hope he shows up soon. It's Dr. Jim Green, the former scientist of NASA. Yeah, you'll very commonly find him in one of these rooms or in astronomy and astrophysics. So that's another great club to follow. So I hope he shows up, because if there's anyone who can get you in touch with Matt Damon, it would be Dr. Jim Green.
That's awesome. He literally can give the Golden Potato Award.
I'm just imagining this the spud-shaped object that weighs like it weighs a few kilograms and looks like the Heisman Trophy or whatever they have for the hockey or whatever, and it's just it gets larger every year as there's more bountiful added to like cornucopia, and just gets more and more gold encrusted. It'd be awesome.
I mean, honestly, I think for Matt Damon, that should feel better than having an Oscar on his mantle.
And
like
now
that's
we're
going to get a
talking.
lot more questions. When people come over to Matt Damon's house, they're going to be like, what is that spud? Like, not what the Oscar is. They're like, let me hold
Yeah,
the
there's plenty of
spud.
people that have that, but the future, this is what you're holding in your hand here.
Exactly.
For spectacular effort in food tech.
For advancing of the potato arts. I'd like to thank the Academy.
And Idaho.
Let's just
I
establish.
have another question.
Sure,
Let's go for it.
Oh, when it comes to, obviously there's going to be food design specifically for space travel. And when it comes to human experience of eating, is there research diving deep into that in terms of its functionality to say, selected future human travelers who want to bring some sort of memories or comfort from home, right? And so that this will actually help support their mental well-being. If they're feeling homesick, the food kind of like allows to provide some sense of comfort. I'm just wondering, are there researchers or diving deep into that in terms of the experience of eating in mimicking that, so that their mental well-being is also being considered, and so that they can continue to function at a long period of time into space. Something I am definitely very curious and very passionate into this area in terms of food, eating experience wise. Thank you.
And Rowena, I think that that is such a huge thing that just starting to get involved with this, that a lot of people don't realize is truly the psychology of this, and how just our interaction with food, something as simple as a smell or even the look and the feel of all these things that offer us this nostalgia, and deep dive into like all these feelings, sensory experiences with food, that really helps the psychological aspect. And so yeah, there's obviously the nutrient component, but I think what you're saying is totally true, and it also makes a lot of people more interested in this topic, right? Because it's not just how can we get nutrients into these astronauts. It's not about taking vitamins every day. It's about like, how do we keep their mental strength as much as their physical?
Yeah, I was just in reference to that. It's the experience, add that more the satisfaction, just like feeling satisfied being there. That sense of, like I said, that not just psychological, but I also noticed there is a physiological effect on the body during a high stress situation. I think it helps calm these future human space travel to prolong their longevity in space, because it is a sense of, there's a lot of isolation is going to take place, and the mental part of it is going to be one of the biggest challenge. And I think adding the food experience into not just the food and taste and the smell, but just that sense of comfort that reminds them of home, I think it's going to be one of the biggest contribution to success in staying in this pretty very extreme environment and very isolating environment that they're not familiar, unless they're born there naturally from the get-go. But for the first phase, I think for the first travel, adapting to these unknown environment is going to be very challenging.
Rowena, I completely agree with you. In fact, what we touched on in the panel, in terms of a long duration mission to Mars being roughly 3 years long, I talked to a couple of astronauts who said that the single biggest morale boost that they received on the ISS was, resupply. So them getting a shipment in of fresh foods, like foods from Earth, foods that make them feel more connected to home. And on a long duration mission to Mars, they will not be getting resupply. They're not going to be on the ISS. They're going to be seeing each other and the stars for a long period of time without resupply. And so that's got to impact them negatively, psychologically and emotionally. So how can we accelerate food technologies that will generate food that makes them feel closer to home, food that they can actually taste, and like notice a difference in taste, because their sense of smell is impacted, their sense of taste is impacted a great deal. So that's all the interesting stuff that we love talking to teams about with regards to deep space food. And so thank you so much for bringing that out.
I want to chime in very briefly on just a 30-second thing, is that in the Navy for nuclear submarines, where they do deep isolation for 8-10 months in a row and have control of nuclear weapons that could end the world, they spent an enormous amount of effort going, what is the psychological state? What affects people's morale? Because that's a very big importance to them. One thing the Navy found was the food supply was one of the main things that determines whether or not people are happy. And who knew? So if you look at the design of a nuclear submarine, the cafeteria section right in the middle is actually something that gets a lot of attention. The other thing to consider is it's actually one of the only rate limiters behind a nuclear submarine for how long it can maintain its depth for underwater for long duration, 8-10 month, et cetera, missions, is literally getting food supplies for the crew. Because every other part of the system is completely, nuclear energy can go forever, or 20, 30 years. But the thing is that the people, though, they are doing fresh food resupply for each time. So this is one of those things that they put a lot of effort into, and they found that was really an important part where they couldn't just skimp on that. So I consider that when we start doing deep space stuff, this is going to be something that's very much tied into that as being a higher priority. And if we don't, we'll learn it the hard way. So what's really exciting about this being a more positive side is being able to preemptive, and so we aren't just playing catch up after we have the rocket masses. We're able to really, really create something the astronauts can actually get excited about. It's going to be really, really cool. All right, sorry I interrupted there. I think it was, take it away.
Sure. Very great point, Chris and Florina. I wanted to bring up a couple things. So one, I know that the SCI, the Space Exploration Initiative at MIT, is doing some research on fermented food in space. And if you think at some culture, fermented food like kimchi or some pickles have that ability to bring back memories, positive memories to certain people. So that's a great way to look into that. Another thing I'd like to bring up is when we think of memory and emotional support for people who are isolated, we have to think it in many different senses. So here when we talk about food, we have the sense of taste, obviously. We have the sense of smell. We have this, the fact that we see colors and textures. Also the crunch versus the smoothness of the food inside the mouth. But also we have to think about what the other senses give us as well. The fact that right now aboard the ISS, people tend to go to the cupola or some kind of window to look out, look back at the Earth and really enjoy their meal. The fact that some people like to eat meals together. What does it mean to eat a meal together when you're so far away from home? So really thinking about the whole experience of eating and what it means and what's putting something in your mouth and really enjoying it. And getting all the benefits from it, or to nourish your body, but also to nourish your soul, is equally as important to kind of guarantee the success of such a perilous mission.
It's excellent. I want to say one more chime in point with things I could step outside. I don't have the stage, but one more point to make is that the variety of foods that people eat is actually much smaller in range than normally you would think. The number of staple crops, about 89% of calories come from 10 crops for the majority of human beings. When you start getting to more, all these varieties and spices, it dramatically expands it. But at that point, it's not being there for necessarily for energy or nutrition. It's not there for flavor. And what gets really interesting is when you start looking at why do we choose those crops, a lot of that had to do with optimization around farm equipment or fertilizer or certain types of agricultural practices that were very important here on Earth. What gets really interesting is when you start looking at the long-term future of humanity, how many human beings can Earth support? A lot of this has to do with how much light we get from the sun. And the main rate limiter is how much energy we can convert into actual food crops and turn into something useful here on Earth, but not just for human beings, but for all the other creatures in biosphere, et cetera. The long-term future of humanity might not be on Earth. It might be in more space stations that we start constructing in absolutely astronomically large quantities. What's interesting to consider for that is that our ability to protect the biosphere that's had millions of years to evolve and coexist with human beings, the amount of the biosphere that's actually edible is actually shockingly large. There's over 100,000 or so, 400,000, somewhere in that range, of different plants that are theoretically edible by human beings and different quantities, and that's without doing variations with breeding and such. However, because we have a very specific way of doing agricultural practices at scale, we're only using a very small amount of the total possibility space of what's possible to consume. And the reason why it's really interesting is that when we talk about flavor, when we talk about the possibilities for food, we're only using a small amount of this. In the future, we may have an entirely different palette of an entirely different diet with entirely different options of what we're currently occupying. So what is really exciting is when you start looking at space-based agriculture, that's going to be a thing once we start having population sizes in space of 1,000 or 10,000 people at a time. Right now, at any time, there's actually literally a website called How Many People Are There in Space? And it's rarely above like 4 or 5 people because it's like the space station and going up and down to it, and that's it. However, as we start making launches cheaper, as more people spend more time in space, and we start having more humanity off-world, this is going to become a dominant priority of what people are actually going to spend their time optimizing for. So this is an exciting time to get into the ground floor of this stuff and actually get to play a piece of the future. So it's not just the 10 crops we have that grew here here on Earth, but you're creating the next generation of crops that's going to feed the next future of humanity.
Yes, just so really quickly, Chris, to your point, we've been talking to a lot of local farmers here at Future of Food at South by, and the conversations around this have been so fascinating. Some people are opining that farmers in the next decade will be they're going to be people.
Florina, your audio quality just nosedived just for a moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, because now I'm getting in the car. Sorry. So as I was saying, because of demand in the next decade for nutritious food, people were saying here at the Future of Food at South by Southwest, the farmers will be some of the most wealthiest, most successful folks around, driving Lamborghinis perhaps, because
demand for food that is grown, healthful, nutritious food that is homegrown on a viable soil, because of the how things are declining on that front. And so that has been really interesting for me to hear, kind of an eye-opener, because I did not think of things from that perspective. And then meeting so many people who are innovating on food. One of the folks who actually won phase one, one of the winners of phase one at the Deep Space Food Challenge, is actually creating protein out of carbon drawn from air. So literally creating food from air. And so, I mean, that is what we're talking about with regards to the future of food and what we're trying to accelerate with this challenge.
One last thing I add, because I need to get going here with things, but one thing that's really interesting is that we host the Post-Scarcity Club here on Clubhouse on a regular basis, and we talk about all sorts of things, both near term and far future. One of the things to consider is that we have a conversation that comes up often is the idea between minimalist and maximalist post-scarcity. One of the ideas is that for when they're designing the initial round of food packets and everything for going for astronauts going to space, a lot of that was actually adapted from the military, from B-2 bombers and such, when they're saying, well, we're only going to have less than 1,000 pilots that are ever going to use this thing, so we can do just the minimum that makes it work. And they actually say, well, we'll have actually 12 different food items, because, why not? 12 items, that should be enough for everyone. But when we're looking at long-term future of humanity, it's really worth considering the maximalist perspective of how far you can push these supplies. One thing to consider actually specifically is with meat. Right now, a lot of food is not actually grown on Earth for human beings, but actually for feeding for cattle, some of which we eat. Now, the reason why this is really interesting is that the synthetic meat, which is a whole market there. This is like impossible meats and stuff. Sometimes you go to some fast food restaurants and stuff, you can actually start tasting some of these things. And it's actually fascinating, the things that they're experimenting with. But one of the things that's crazy about it is the price point of these has nosedived. It's actually progressed faster, not just by Moore's law for chip production, or faster than the genetic engineering sequence base pairs, which is astounding for biotech. It's actually decreasing in cost by orders of magnitude faster than each of those. So the ability for us to actually grow not just here's a plant-based diet, but also synthetic meat at the same time. This is some of these possibilities that are going to be on the very near-term horizon. And what's really cool about the intersection of advanced technology and traditionalist agricultural practices, that we get to kind of see that intersection and find the best for what we need to moving forward. So it's some very, very exciting stuff. I'm very grateful to the Deep Space Food people for organizing all this stuff.
Chris, yes. Oh, no, I definitely don't want to cut anyone off. I do want to say that we are running past 90 minutes, which is, I know that some of Dane and Florina are having to exit very shortly. So let's start adding like the last questions, and then we want them to talk about the next steps where you can find them, and the Deep Space Food Challenge team where you can look for them in the future, so that you guys can stay tapped into this conversation. So definitely ask the last question, please.
I want just to speak about the biotechnology in the Food Space Challenge. I think that is the best solution for this aspect. What is your opinion about biotechnology
That's a great question. I'll let Chris or Dane.
I'm back. We loved it. Yeah, biotech is absolutely fantastic. We've actually, still speaking for Methuselah, we've invested in and helped start like a number of different biotech companies, tissue engineering in particular, and various different aging senescence therapies. So yeah, no, absolutely. As far as the food challenge goes, there's a lot of different ways of approaching it. And it's good to see that there's so many teams who are kind of combining different approaches to create a food system that's able to kind of do everything that it needs, because there's so many different approaches that have to come together to create a diet that has enough variety to keep people happy and well fed. So that's yeah, biotech is great.
Dane, while we got you here, please tell us, what are the next steps for Deep Space Food and the team? Where can all the people who have been engaging on this chat sort of look forward to hearing from us next, and some milestones maybe that they can look forward to?
Sure. So anybody who wants to keep track of what we're doing is, of course, more than welcome to email us directly if you have any specific questions. So I think their email address should be there. If not, it's really simple to remember. It's just admin, ADMIN, at deepspacefoodchallenge.org. And we'll answer any questions that you have as quickly as we can. Aside from that, of course, you can go to the website and sign up for the newsletter. That'll keep you posted on the general activities. And also we have a LinkedIn forum, which is also linked from the website, which is a little bit more moment to moment. Although there is a likelihood that we'll probably be switching sometime soon to Slack, but that's not totally decided yet. But it seems like it's probably a better platform for phase 2, but we'll see. So that's just the super short term of it. We'll also be doing probably different appearances throughout the year. We'll likely be at IAC in Paris in September, and then also there's the details have yet to be ironed out, but there's probably going to be quite a lot of stuff towards the March timeframe of next year. So at minimum, it's going to be like that, and just send us your email, and we'll keep you updated on everything. And that's the most of it. Of course, there's also Florina here with some thoughts.
Actually, I was just going to ask Stephanie if she wanted to provide a bit more color around what the IAC is in Paris. That would be also something definitely that everyone should tune in for.
Hey, can you hear me? So hi, I'm Stephanie, and the IAC is the International Astronautical Congress that is held around the year. It's one of the largest space conferences that's held annually. Last year, it was in Dubai. The team, we were there organizing a panel on the future of the deep space food movement, and had a great success with some of the phase 1 teams, some judges, Martha Stewart, so we had some celebrities. And so with that level of excitement in the space sector, we're also going back to IAC and for this year in Paris, and we'll figure out the right panel format to bring this voice of ours for the deep space food into the general public, but back again in the space sector. So this is a chance for you to interact with other space foodies, as well as other people that are interested in how we evolve our space food development and technology and other areas of space exploration in the future.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Excellent. Want to go ahead and wrap the room, or do you want to continue, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, let's because we went out on this mission for 90 minutes, and I think it's probably time to wrap the room. But God, have I loved this.
We'll have to do another one sometime.
We definitely should. And honestly, what we said on the stage here at South by on the international prize is so close to our hearts. I mean, the only way that we can drive real solutions to the problems of food insecurity and world hunger that we face here on Earth is to involve people at a global scale and have them scale their technologies in their own communities. So we feel very strongly about that, and yeah, look forward to building the International Prize with everyone here and with folks that we touch base with at South by Southwest. But also, anyone that we come across at any of our large events, we're happy to connect and we're happy to discuss the International Prize with them.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined here. It's just been such an incredible conversation. I know there's going to be dozens more. And if you guys signed up at the top, there is the link just underneath those tabs of engineering, science, and space that you can put your contact information in on that form. And we will follow up with you if there's other events and other ways to connect and keep you informed and involved. And then there's also a link there to donate to the International Prize. So if you're really excited about making sure that there's a way that we can compensate these incredible international teams and all the incredible things that they're bringing to this challenge, you could click right there and we would love that. The IAC in Paris is happening September 18th through 22nd this year. So mark your calendars, and we will also send out emails to the group about that as well. So if you sign up, you will be informed.
Yay. Thanks everyone for coming. We really appreciate the support and the discussion. This has been fantastic. And thank you, team Tova, for leading the conversation.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you guys too. And to give people just a bit more time to follow everyone. It's customary here that we do a final countdown before closing every room. So it gives people a chance to follow everybody. So everyone, make sure to click the greenhouse, follow small steps and giant leaps, follow the moderators on stage, and feel free to join in our countdown, which I will start in 10, 9,
8,
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
1.5.
Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Later.
Bye.